Welcome, students! Today, we're going to explore a very interesting and funny chapter from your Moments textbook. The name of the chapter is In the Kingdom of Fools. Now, while it is a humorous story, it actually teaches us a very, very serious lesson. This is a traditional Kannada folktale, which has been retold for us by the famous scholar A.K. Ramanujan. So, as we go through this story, I want you to keep one simple question in your mind. What happens when foolish people are given power and put in charge? It's something to think about because this funny tale is going to give us a very serious answer. You see, this story is a folktale. And what does that mean? Well, a folktale is a traditional story. It's a kind of treasure that is passed down from one generation to the next. Just imagine your grandparents telling you stories. They weren't just for fun, were they? They were also meant to teach us something important about life, about what is right and what is wrong. That's exactly what a folktale does. All right, now let us step into the world of our story. We begin our journey in a very, very strange place, the Kingdom of Fools. And here, everything is quite literally turned upside down. In this kingdom, the king and his minister, well, they were not very wise. In fact, they were quite foolish. And their very first order was a strange one. They ordered everyone to treat night as day and day as night. So people would sleep all day and work all night, and if anyone disobeyed, the punishment was death. Now, this rule, it shows a complete lack of reasoning, doesn't it? Let's just pause here for a moment and think about this. Why is it so important for rules to have some logic behind them? You see, the people in this kingdom, they followed these silly orders simply because they were afraid. And that tells us something about the dangers of foolish leadership. And that wasn't the only strange rule. The second one was about prices. In this kingdom, everything, and I mean everything, cost the same, just one dadu. It didn't matter if you were buying a big measure of rice or a small bunch of bananas, the price was always one dadu. This shows that the king and minister had no idea about value. Now, into this strange kingdom arrive a wise guru and his disciple. And right away, we see a clear difference between the two. The guru represents wisdom. He immediately understands that this place is dangerous. It's a kingdom of fools, and he says this won't last very long. But his disciple, he represents temptation. He is just delighted by the cheap food and wants to stay and eat as much as he can. He completely ignores his guru's warning. And now the story takes a very interesting turn. A thief dies, and this one event starts a whole chain of blame, leading to a trial that is just, well, completely foolish. This is where we see just how silly the king's idea of justice really is. So what happens is, a thief breaks into a house, but as he's escaping, the wall of the house collapses and he dies. Now you and I would think that's the thief's own fault, right? But not in this kingdom. The thief's brother goes to the king and demands justice. He blames the owner of the house for having a weak wall, and the foolish king agrees that the homeowner must be punished. When the merchant, the owner of the house, is brought to the court, he is obviously scared. He quickly thinks of a way to shift the blame. He says, "It's not my fault, it's the fault of the man who built the wall. He didn't build it properly. You should punish him." So next, the bricklayer is brought in. And what's his excuse? He blames a dancing girl. He says that many years ago, when he was building the wall, a dancing girl kept walking up and down the street and the sound of her jingling anklets distracted him. And because of that, he couldn't build the wall right. And can you believe it? The king accepts this reason. And so the chain of blame continues. The dancing girl, who is now a very old woman, is brought before the king. And what does she say? She blames a goldsmith. She says the goldsmith was lazy and kept delaying her order for jewelry, which made her walk up and down that street so many times. The goldsmith, in his defense, says that he had to finish an urgent order for a rich merchant first because there was a wedding in their family. And, he adds, rich men are very impatient. Now guess whose father this rich merchant was. It was the father of the very same merchant whose house wall had fallen. So after this whole comical and ridiculous process, the blame comes full circle, right back to the original merchant. And the king's final logic is the most foolish of all. He declares that since the merchant's inherited all his father's wealth, he must have also inherited his father's sins. Therefore, the merchant must be punished. Now, this entire trial scene is a perfect example of something we call satire. Satire is when an author uses humor and exaggeration to criticize foolishness, especially the foolishness of people in power. The author isn't just telling a funny story here, he is using this humor to make a very serious point about the dangers of blind authority and illogical justice. We now come to the most exciting part of the story. The disciple, who gave in to the temptation of cheat food, is now in very serious trouble, and his only hope is the wisdom of his guru. This is where we see a direct clash between wisdom and stupidity. But there's a problem with the execution. The new steak they made is too big, and the thin merchant doesn't fit it. So, what does the foolish king do? He orders his men to go and find a man who is fat enough to fit the steak. You see, at this point, it is not about guilt or innocence anymore. It is just about size. And who do you think they find? Of course, it's the disciple who has grown very fat by eating all that cheap food. And in that moment of fear, as he is being taken away, he finally remembers his guru's wise words. This is a city of fools. You don't know what they will do next. But just in the nick of time, the guru arrives. And he doesn't use any force. He uses his intelligence. He comes up with a very clever psychological plan. First, he starts a fake fight with his disciple about who should die first. Then he pulls the king aside and tells him a secret. He says this stake is the stake of justice, and whoever dies on it first will be reborn as the king of this kingdom. The foolish king and his minister, blinded by their greed and their desire for power, completely fall for this trick. They want to be king and minister in their next life too. So that night, they secretly go to the prison, release the guru and disciple, and take their places at the execution stake. So, with the foolish king and minister gone, how does this strange story end? And what are the final lessons we can learn from it? Let's see. The kingdom is finally saved from its foolish rulers. The people of the town then beg the wise guru and his disciple to become their new king and minister. After some thought, they agree. And the very first thing they do is change all the old, foolish laws. Day becomes day again, night becomes night, and wisdom finally triumphs over foolishness. So, to summarize, what are the important lessons from this story? First, the guru's warning tells us that it's dangerous to live among foolish people. Second, the disciple's fate shows us that greed and temptation can lead us into a lot of trouble. Third, the king and minister prove that foolish leaders are a danger to everyone. And finally, the story teaches us that true justice must be based on reason and logic. So, as we finish, I will leave you with one final thought. Yes, this is an old folktale from long ago, but think about the lessons it teaches us about leadership, about justice, and about the choices we make in our own lives. How can the lessons from this kingdom of fools be applied to our world today? Think about it.